So I want to break down your process a little bit. Has your process kind of changed since you were first writing, your first book to now? Do you still like outline the same way and write down ideas, or what's your process whenever you're kind of getting your juices flowing?
Well, when I first started out, I did what a lot of amateurs do. I started out with page one. Okay, here's a really good scene. And then eventually, like all amateurs, I got to a point where I said, where the heck does this go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a cool first scene, but then what? So I started outlining. Um, there are two schools of thought on that. There are pantsers and plotters.
Mm-hmm.
Pantsers are like seat of the pantsers,
Mm-hmm.
and but I'm a plotter,
Mm-hmm.
and I may not plot out every little detail, but I'm certainly going to know where I'm going and know a few of the main junctures that
Mm-hmm.
I have to pass to get there. So shortly after I started that first book, I started plotting it out, and you want to leave a little room because I said, an author's job is to surprise himself. So you want to leave a little room to surprise yourself. But for the most part, you want to know where that's going, and that applies to comics as well as books, as well as narrative fiction. Um, the That first book eventually it became wound up with a cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't kind of really intend that,
Mm-hmm.
but I said, you know what, there should be more than one book.
Mm-hmm.
So when it became very easy for my agent to sell the second book
Of course.
because she said, look,
You have to know.
when you bought this, you had to know that there was a cliffhanger,
Yep.
and that was so. In terms of process, I know exactly where I'm going, and I plotted out when I was doing when I was writing Star Trek books. I would write 20-page outlines because, first of all, for my own benefit, but also for it's a licensed property, and they want to know exactly what you're writing before you write it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd write very detailed outlines, and I kind of got used to writing detailed outlines.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my short fiction, I kind of do that. The approach is that you're writing about characters again, and every character has a problem. And the story is about whether it's a comic or a book or a short story or a screenplay. The book is always the story is always about solving that problem. And in the beginning, you can't. He or she is not equipped
Mm-hmm.
emotionally or in terms of know-how or in terms of physical
Up.
objects,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Not equipped to solve the
Yeah.
problem. Then in the middle of the book, the second act, more or less, there's a struggle, and as the protagonist is struggling to equip himself or herself with the things he needs to be victorious, at the same time things are not going well. It's getting worse and worse and worse, and the stakes are becoming higher and higher and higher. So there's two kinds of the way I see it. There are two kinds of movements going on. There's a positive movement in that the character is getting better equipped to persevere, and there's also a downward motion in that things are getting worse and
Mm-hmm.
worse and worse and worse. And then in the last act, of course, the protagonist puts it all together
Mm-hmm.
and overcomes his or her problem.
Yep, you overcome the obstacles and finally go into the denouement where everything kind of goes back to the way it was in the beginning, but he's finally overcome it and gone through that personal change in order to get there.
Right, and it's easier in something like Empty Space and something like Dark Stars. In my original fiction, it's easier to do than in something licensed like Star Trek.
Of course, because it's a TV show or it's a comic that they never really can get over their problems. So they have to be like, you can't change who the character is. You can't change, Batman from dealing with, the death of his parents and finally being like, you know what? It's okay they're dead. Because then there would be no character,
Right,
So,
like in the movie Batman and Robin.
Mhm.
What's his problem?
yeah, exactly.
The yeah the thing is, when you have a licensed property, you want to have little problems that you can overcome.
Of course.
You know, like for instance, like Geordie. I wanted to write a Geordie story that I never did, but it was about, Geordie's parents were killed in a fire, and Geordie LaForge from Next Generation, and I said, well, maybe he's afraid of fire. Maybe he's got some underlying fear of fire. Maybe that's a problem we can get over. I did write a story, a couple of young adult books about Data, and Data having trouble communicating with his fellow cadets at the academy because he just doesn't get them.
Yeah.
He's still challenged when we see him on Next Generation, but maybe he was more challenged when he started out. So you find a little arc, a small problem that you can address without,
changing the character.
Changing the character, upsetting the sandbox.
Exactly.
You got to put everything back the way you found it.
That's the thing, is you can mess with it a little bit, but it has to go back to normal for the next episode, or else you can't have the next episode or the next book or the next series.
Right.
And so that's really cool.